family and friends, we want to thank you for your support and love over this journey. We are here today to celebrate. We are celebrating the former life of this church. It is no doubt bittersweet. While it is sad that this life has passed on, we also celebrate the new life this church has been given. Today we want to recognize all those that were a part of this process. Friends, family, co-laborers in the gospel. There were many things that I hope we learned along the way. More than anything, may we never forget the joy of the journey. Today, sadly, we lay to rest this church. In these cases, we don't like to talk about the past. But in this scenario, the past tells us about the future. Sometimes things have to die before they can live.
My eyes opened, weary but unable to stay closed long enough to put a weary mind and body to rest for the night. The howl of the wind outside of the RV pushed against the thin tree limbs, causing them to sound as if they may not make it through the night. Occasionally, a small extension of the closest tree would brush against the side of the RV, creating a slight scratching sound. It was a reminder that in this world that we live in, the world doesn't sleep, even though us humans must. My eyes shifted around a dark sleeping compartment, already adjusting to the night's visuals. I could hear the sounds of coyotes in the distant background. As a person that's rarely had any difficulties sleeping, I found myself frustrated on that 4th of July night. Only this year, it wasn't the fireworks going off that was keeping the facilities of my mind alert to the early hours of the morning. It was an inner tension that I felt. The tension was so gripping that sweat beads would accumulate on my forehead. I'd find myself grinding my teeth or clenching my jaw subconsciously. My appetite was limited, my mind disturbed. What could be tormenting the soul of this young man on a short family vacation, lying in a small sleeping compartment of an RV on a 4th of July night? Well, it's part of the story of how we started. It didn't go right. Well, at least by our projections. The church hadn't even started yet, and yet so much had happened. In 2017, the church that hadn't met yet was off to a troubled start. There wasn't complete support, but I actually understand why. Yet at the same time, I was tasked to follow through with the project. I look back now and I see that it was not just from humans, but it was from the Lord. I can't begin to describe the feeling of continuing to lead a church plant that is seemingly losing more and more support every day. The temptation to give up remained, but the commitment to the individuals that had stepped out and risked their names by association to it, they deserve to see this thing come to fruition. To be honest with you, the data wasn't there. The financial support was at risk, and people were growing more and more restless. As I would walk through the halls of the planting church, it was more and more difficult to have conversations deeper than the weather. Eyes would look up as they passed by. You could tell that there was more behind the glance than just a casual greeting. I would walk into groups of people that normally I would converse with on a regular basis, and conversations would stop upon my arrival. To be honest with you, I felt at times like the enemy of the state. Planting a new church, out of a church that wasn't thriving was not a popular topic amongst some. My orders remained to move on. I was not told to stop. I was not given a red light. The team was more motivated than ever to press on. It didn't seem to me like the Lord had released me from this task, although I asked him multiple times that if he had, that he would put a roadblock in front of me that I couldn't overcome. So I had to remain faithful. 2 months before the launch, we didn't have a building. There was no place to meet. The planting church was running out of money, not just for this project, but altogether. Tensions mounted. A meeting was held to discuss a possible meeting place for the new church plant. Not surprisingly, that meeting turned into a conversation about shutting down the church plant altogether. Then it happened. One fateful morning, I was met with a blow that I didn't see coming. The pastor of the planting church resigned. There were moments over the past year that it felt like him and I may have been the only ones carrying the banner for the planting of this church, along with the team members that were with me. Well, the banner had officially dropped. You know that feeling you get when the wind in your lungs all of a suddenly leaves? That's what it felt like. My vision left spinning as a child that just exited a wild ride on the merry-go-round. So much of my life and the lives of my team had been absorbed in the planting of this new church over the last year. I was terrified how this might affect the process. You see, I don't blame people for not understanding, but when you're not in the middle of something like this, when you haven't given yourself and invested yourself mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually into a project this big, you don't get how paramount and how scary moments like this can be. People on the outside simply say, well, look at the logic. And I saw the logic. But drawing that line between faith, God's will, and logic was really, really hard to do in that season. The new leader of the planting church and I got together and we decided to move forward with the project. We both knew it was going to look like what we thought it might look like before, but that we would move forward in faith. I wish that I could say that that conversation was the end of the tension, but it just kept growing. I met with the team members to tell them that we were going to have to plant with almost no money. We had no building, no resources. We just had the grit of 16 people and some of their family members. 16 people focused on starting this new work for the kingdom. I was impressed with the strong, faithful response to the individuals that were not scared to face the unknown. All of their names were on the line. That didn't stop a soul. What I wish people knew is that while my heart was so invested in this new church plant, in no way did I stop caring for the planting church, my home church of the last 9 years. So much of my spiritual journey's growth at arriving at the point to where we could even do this was attributed to their faithful kingdom witness. I love the church dearly. I never wanted to do anything to hurt their ability to minister. On that night of July 4, 2017, I'll never forget that night. Just one of the many nights where I felt the crushing weight of the implications of this decision. Tensions were growing. Finances were extremely tight. Not everyone supported the decision to move forward. Leadership transitions are hard. Maybe one of the greatest tests to my leadership up until that point was this moment. Helping to honor and transition the current church to their new leadership to support in any way that I was asked or that I could. But at the same time, planting a church that within just 2 months was going to start a new kingdom work, and doing so with whatever resources that we could possibly come up with, very minimal. I'm no hero here, and I would be foolish to insinuate that I was the only one that was in a difficult position. Not even close. There was tension across the board. Not all tension was handled correctly, and I didn't handle all of my tension correctly. I can only speak for what I did. I've grown up with a chip on my shoulder. Ultimately, at times, I've let that chip be the motivation for pushing forward, sometimes too fast. The idea that people were not in full support of the church plant grew into resentment. What was really reasonable concern in people's hearts in my sinfulness was transformed into a belief that people didn't believe in me. That I was once again in a situation, as I had been in numerous times in my life, where I was going to have to prove myself. So, I did what I normally do. I reclused. I pulled away from relationships and friendships. I became cynical. I assumed the worst in each interaction I had. It was me against everyone. That's how I saw it, at least. Man, what an unhealthy position to take. As our launch date closed, things actually got a little worse.
We were playing in a softball game. Our church had, the launch team had that softball game, or had the softball team, and we were playing in Republic, and I remember everything was up in the air. We didn't know for sure if the launch was going to happen, or if it was going to be stopped. We didn't know. Justin was in a meeting, so he was late getting to the game, but I think I knew he was in the meeting, and I think you knew he was in the meeting, and I don't think anyone else on the launch team knew what the meeting was for. So I remember playing in the game and him showing up, I don't know, maybe halfway through the game, and trying to play it cool. Like we didn't want it to be obvious, but we kind of wanted to know, is this still happening? So I remember that being super stressful, and trying to play it off that there wasn't some big decision being made. Because part of me really expected him to come to the game and tell us, we're not launching this. And this was, I don't know if you remember this, it's probably a month before we launched, maybe 2 months before. I mean, it was over the summer. So I think that was hard, and that's part of the ever-changing or the unknown. There were so many unknowns.
There was an official meeting by the leadership team of the planting church to take a final vote on whether this should happen or not. We're talking weeks before we launched. I remember being on a ball field, a part of a softball team assembled by our launch team. This meeting was happening. I wasn't at this meeting. And I was sitting at that ball game. Not a single member on the team knew that our church plant and the possibility of it going forward was actually on the line that night due to the vote of the leadership. Only when one of my team members who served on that leadership team came back and hinted that everything was going to move forward did I know that we were still a green light to go.
Probably the biggest pit in my stomach moment was when I had to attend a meeting at the sending church that was literally a board vote of whether our church plant would be allowed to happen or not. And sitting there and just praying and hoping to let it move on, and truly walking into that meeting not even knowing where anyone was at on that. I didn't know if I was going to walk out and have to go report back and say, it's over, we're done, or they're on board, or we can do it, but there's no funds. I had no idea what was going to come out of that. That was not pleasant. So that's the perfect example of what you're talking about, of being the enemy of the state. Okay, so I walk into the meeting, okay, and I'm the only advocate. The rest of it's just a discussion, but I'm the only one from the launch team in the meeting. So I'm the only advocate. So we go through all that. So we leave there. Thankfully, the vote was continue on, but we don't have any funding. But if you want to continue on, go ahead. So I drive to the softball game, and the only one I can tell is you. Because otherwise, it was like playing this game of, making sure that we don't make anyone look bad, but I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. It was such a complicated thing. So I have to kind of ease out there. I think we were switching, going from the dugout to the outfield, and I kind of run by you and say, we still have a church. And that was it. It's just like this weird, spy movie. I've got to pass you a note while I'm running by, because I can't even remember why. I think it was just trying to, I guess, be courteous, be polite, not throw anyone under the bus. But why? I don't think anyone else knew, I guess is what it was, that was even up for vote.
And I think what we were trying to do is protect unity.
Yeah.
Because it could be taken the wrong way, that the sending church would, because we had our own emotions that we were struggling with, right?
That's what it was, because, yeah.
We're already fighting our flesh and this frustration with being sent out on a mission and then it being halted. And so it's almost like, okay, we're going to put the weight of this on us, but that there may be some on the team that won't handle or are not in a place to handle the realities of the back and forth pull. You take some of that on for them.
I mean, I can see where, the financial strain of that, the sending church wasn't in a place to be able to handle it. I get it. I was on the board. I saw what was happening in there. But that's spot on. I mean, if you don't have that information, you just can't process, through what's going on, and then you just wind up, getting resentful.
Yeah, it's a difficult spot, and we understood why it was a difficult challenge for them to be in, but we still felt an obligation to continue on.
This is the thing that I wish everyone could have known 5 years ago. I was always going to be obedient to whatever the leadership wanted to do. I was not going to rebel and do something against their will. If they chose to shut it down, I would have complied. It would have been hard. It would have been difficult just 2 to 3 weeks before we launched. But the last thing I wanted was disunity. I got why these conversations were happening. In the same position, I probably would have had the same talks. And then that's the thing that I wish that everyone could have saw. I didn't want to be the enemy of the state, the leader of the perceived rebellion. I just wanted to do what God was asking. The Lord would manage these tensions when they were at their worst. I believe His will was accomplished. The church was planted on September 10th, 2017. The planting church went on to install their new leadership and has thrived ever since. Our expected budget of $70,000 for the plant became $15,000. Our building lease became the rental of a few small rooms of a local recreational center. Our meetings had to be held on Sunday nights because there was already a church that was meeting there on Sunday mornings. Nothing was like what we had imagined. But isn't that the way it always goes when you're following the Lord? When should a story ever go? Just according to how I plotted out every detail. It never goes like that. You see, there were lessons to learn for me. I was prideful. I was overconfident. Honestly, I was unprepared for what I was about to do. I'm astonished that people believed in someone as raw as I was. I'm surprised, honestly, that people followed me. It was the sovereignty and the guidance of the Lord. I may never understand why he chose me, other than maybe I was the least qualified amongst them all. I needed to take the hard road. I needed to experience the tensions of being caught in between two sides. I needed to learn how to balance relationships in the midst of trials. I needed to know how to turn to the Lord on nights like that lonely July 4th. I needed to be brought to the end of myself. Only then, when fully on empty, could I be out of the way for God to do in me what he fully needed to do. I'm so thankful for God's grace. I didn't plant a church. A team didn't plant a church. An existing church really didn't plant a new church. God planted a church. He did it all. Every single part. This wasn't the start we wanted. It would have been great to have more money. Of course, it would have been great to have a better situation and conditions and no surprises along the way. That's not what we got. We got what we needed. I got what I needed. A reality check. So this presents an interesting question. Why would God keep a little church plant alive during its embryonic phases, only then later to bring it to its knees and eventually force it into a position to die to itself? Well, again, as the theme is of this episode, we had to learn the hard way. Isn't that normally how stubborn people have to learn? I wouldn't have learned anything if I would have just shut the thing down and went on. But instead, the trials that would erupt from the continuing effort of this church would melt down my clay idols. It would push me to the edge of my leadership ability. And then it would do it again, and again, and again. I was insecure. I was trying too hard to be like everyone else. I wanted to prove all of my naysayers wrong. What's so ironic about that is that the group of people perceivably rooting against me at that time is so much significantly smaller than the group that exists today. And to be honest with you, if I do my job right, it's going to get massively larger. I'm ready to say some pretty controversial things. I'm ready to dive headfirst into the absolute ugliness that is going on, that I contributed to. Not anymore, though. I won't do it. You'll have to kill me to participate in it. It's time to get the church turned around. Or die trying. I wanted a church truly that would honor Christ and would see people come to know him. But to be honest with you, I also had so much selfish ambition in my heart. I'm surprised I was ever even able to concentrate on the work of the Lord, considering how much selfish ambition I had inside of my heart. I'm not alone. There's a lot of selfish ambition that happens in the church today. It's not just leaders either. It's people that sit in the pews. It's people that serve. It's people that give. It's people at all levels of the church. Now listen, this is not a church bashing conversation at all. I love the local church. In fact, I love her so much that I'm willing to go to fight for the argument to restore her back to the bride she is supposed to be. I think it's important for us all to ask the question, what is our motivation?
And here's my thing too, is, you're out to prove something, but then at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what do I need to prayerfully consider? I'm on God's side. We're planning a church for him. I'm on his side. What else do I need to, this has to be right. Well, but your heart's not right. And so that's the whole problem. The stubbornness in my own heart. And I think that was a problem, because I feel like let me just speak for myself. I feel like I probably missed prayerfully seeking at a certain point in the process. I think I began missing prayerfully seeking God's will for what he wanted this church to be, because I was so bent on making sure it happened at all costs. It became a pride thing, probably.
Why is it that we're a part of the group that we're a part of? Is it the social construct? Is it the other people that attend? Is it the talent behind their musicians? Is it the talent behind the speakers? Is it the accommodations and the comfortability of the building, the convenience that it offers me? Is it their youth program or their kids program is designed in such a way that I don't really have to be involved in the discipleship of my children because the church does it for me? What is our motivation? Truly. As Christians, oftentimes we know the Sunday school answer. We know what we should say. We know that the answer should be that we want to see people get saved. But what exactly are they getting saved to? Are we presenting to them the true gospel of Jesus Christ, one that bids them to come and die to themselves? Or are we presenting to them some candy-coated version of how the gospel is going to prosper them and make them better and provide something for them? The church doesn't exist to build a brand around a logo, a leader, or some personalities, or even the social construct of the people that attend there. Any local expression of the church is meant to glorify God, to assemble the saints. Really, the church exists to disciple believers. If you just stick to discipleship, people will come to find Christ. God will save them in our midst. It's not our job to convert. It's our job to disciple. The Lord calls those whom he wills to himself. He does that through the process of discipleship. He does that as the church lifts up and glorifies him. It's time to get back to what we're originally supposed to do. It's time to turn off the fog machines, hang up the show, put away the costumes, kill the pomp and circumstance, and just simply get back to what we've been asked to do. call sinners to repentance by the word of God, proclaim the gospel on earth, bid them come and die. This is the church that had to die.
Today our hearts are with the family of those connected to the loss of this life. What you'll be able to take into the days ahead is the lessons you've learned and the memories of God's goodness in the midst of human failure. Today we lay to rest Life Church, the church that didn't start that way that was wanted, but died the way it needed to die. God bless and Godspeed. Rest in peace, our old friend.